Vaishescha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Today we are going to study Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse number 5. Udharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva ripur atmanaha. Translation. A man must elevate himself by his own mind, not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. In spiritual life, the mind is a very important element because, as Krishna is saying here in this verse, it can be a very helpful tool or a very degrading tool. Now these days, with so many communications, media and like that, it's very difficult to focus the mind. Television, for example, is incredibly distracting, and the rate of change in which images are presented is so fast that the mind becomes restless. So in spiritual life, what we want to do is change the object in which the mind is focused from material to spiritual. For example, when we chant the holy name in a daily practice with the beads, then the mind is focused on a spiritual place, a spiritual object, a spiritual pastime. And if the mind gets used to thinking of spiritual things, then the mind will become a very dear friend, because what happens is that whatever the mind is engaged in most of the time, it will continue in that mode, similar to like a snowball or a machine that's already running. It's very hard to stop. So if you chant, for example, the holy name, or you do some certain spiritual practice to focus the mind on a certain object for a considerable period of time, then even if you stop abruptly, the mind will still continue with that. And the same happens the other way. If you are thinking of material objects, like I was saying, television. In television, there's all this sense gratification presented that, oh, buy this food and this other food, and look at this wonderful woman and this other woman, and this wonderful car and this other car is very shiny. You know? This is more faster, better, all this. So the mind is thinking on all these things, the news and all this stuff. So by the time that you want to sit down and think on a spiritual topic, then the opposite happens. All these material things come to the mind. One is thinking of the news, the car, or whatever one saw on TV. So the mind, it can be the best friend or the worst enemy. And one of the essential things to do in spiritual life is to train the mind and how to focus the mind on spiritual subjects. And it really boils down to just making the majority of your day spiritual, or that the majority of your day has spiritual content. If you're doing something, that result of that work, even if it's not directly related to God, that within your mind it's always going to be offered or engaged in the service of God. And that is really the only way, because if we think, no, my mind is so powerful that I can do all kinds of things and then just sit down and think of God, well, no, that is very, very difficult. The mind is restless and it goes all over the place. So I've seen so many gurus that they say, oh, just do whatever you want during the week, and then at the end of the week, you sit down to do this transcendental meditation, and then your mind will be controlled. But we can see by how the mind works that this is ridiculous. The person cannot focus. It doesn't work. So what does work is that the majority of our day, the majority of our time, the majority of our thoughts are spiritual. And then automatically, then the mind will be controlled, and then it will be our best friend. Instead of hearing just any kind of music, we hear music that's devotional, that has some values like surrender, purity, service. And then when we remember the song, automatically we'll have those values in our heart, in our mind. It's really very simple. It's just that for most people there's always some excuse that, oh well, I have to work, and then I have children, and I can't think of God all day. Well, that's just a matter of skill and ingenuity, because here I am, I'm thinking of God all day, and I still perform all kinds of activities. The thing is how to engage them. And if you're in such a condition that even your work is so distasteful or non-spiritual, then you should change your work, change your situation, change your country, join some community. There's so many ways in which you can adjust your life so that God is the center. Once you do that, automatically the mind is your friend. I have a personal experience when I was performing this process of chanting the holy name. I sat down only with my beads and chanted this mantra for months. It was 3 or 4 months in a row. All day I would just do a little music or read little scripture, but most of the day, 8 or 10 hours, it was just chanting this mantra. It was very interesting because I experienced the mind being my best friend. I was chanting all day, and for some reason, if I would have to stop because my throat would get tired or some business to deal with, to buy food or things like that, automatically the mind would come back to the same mantra. And it was very, very nice, very beautiful, because without any endeavor, like when I started, I had to make this big endeavor that, oh, I have to think of God, how can I do it? And I was always trying to find the trick. Now suddenly it became automatic, that I didn't even have to endeavor. Automatically the mind was thinking of these things. And the same thing happens with music. If you hear a song that you like so much many times, then you're singing the song. This is very common to all of us. So it all boils down to the same principle. We just develop our spiritual life in such a way that most of the time we're thinking of God. That's it. Pretty simple. So when the mind is our friend, then we can achieve all kinds of spiritual benefits, and not only because we're doing it for a benefit, but just we experience so much bliss. If we are thinking of God all day on the personal form of God and His name and His activities, His pastimes, then life just completely changes. Just like when there's a 15-year-old girl who's in love, she can be in wherever in hot, cold, or whatever, but she will be focused in the beloved, because that is where her mind is at. And then all the things that make us suffer from the world become much less important. And that beautiful relationship with God becomes much more prominent. And this is the actual consciousness of a spiritual person. It's not that the material world disappears, but it becomes less important and less noticeable. And then it comes to a point where it is explained, a very advanced devotee, a very advanced spiritual person will not even notice if the body is alive, or one is dying or taking another body or changing, traveling or not. similar to a drunk man who doesn't realize if it's day or night, because he's so much absorbed in spiritual consciousness that the externals, the body, becomes very insignificant and not so prominent. Of course, this is a very, very advanced stage. It's just a high ecstasy in spiritual life. It's not something we're going to experience tomorrow if we're starting, but it is possible, and is the result of a steady and gradual progress in spiritual life. The mind is like wild horses, like the senses, the mind. These things are wild, you know. So you cannot train a wild bear or a wild lion in a day. It takes a while. Yeah, but if we practice every day over the course of time, then everything is much easier. If you have any comments or questions, please visit our website, thevedikway.org. Thank you. Hare Krishna.